Hey y'all, I'm James Wright, and welcome to my shop. We are doing an AMA, also a Q&A, or whatever you want to call it. Ask me anything. We're going to be having a little bit of fun in the shop. So I try and do these once every month, every other month, because a lot of people just have random questions they want to ask. But for those of you who don't know, this is a live video. So if you want to see the questions and you are not watching this live, you're watching it recorded, you can go down in the description, and I have listed out all of the questions where you can then jump to where that question is asked in the video, or close to where it is asked. So you can see a little timestamp beside it. You can click that and jump into the video. But for those of you live, go ahead and throw your questions into the live chat. My wife is there manning it, and we're going to be having some fun tonight.
Try to use the blue dot or something.
Yes, if you can
it's a question,
put something at the beginning, it makes it
please.
easier to find in the list. And for those of you who don't know, I do a live every Tuesday, usually 7 p.m. Central Time, and try to do that. Most of the time we're going to be doing a joint or something like that. It's kind of fun to work through, but every now and then I like to throw out a Q&A like this. A couple things coming up. Let's see, a week from this weekend, a week from coming up, so a week and a half from now, I'm going to be down in Georgia at the Peach Meet. This is a Midwest Tool Collectors Association meet, and if you haven't been invited to that, you've got to join Midwest Tool Collectors. There's a link to that down in the description below. And that is a 2-day long tool meet, and it is the largest tool sale in all of the South. Happens every year. So if you want to find out more about that, become a member of the Midwest Tool Collectors, and that will be in a week from this weekend. I'm looking forward to hanging out with many of you down there. Also with the Midwest Tool Collectors, February 24th, I just got the invite in the mail today. That will be up in St. Francis, Wisconsin. And then we have one coming up just down the road from me. It's actually like 2 miles away at the Speedway. What?
Literally just down the road.
Yeah, it's right over there. And that one will be on April 14th. So I'm looking forward to seeing you out at those meets. And then on top of that, we're going to be in Maker Central in the UK. That is on May 11th. So I'm going to be there with my wife, and you can see us all then. I think that's about it for announcements. Am I missing anything? I don't think so. So are there any questions so far?
Oh, yes.
Do I have to ask? What we got?
All right, so Ian started us off with what was the... I think he meant tool. What was the first tool you had as a woodworker?
The first tool that was ever mine was a Black & Decker cordless drill. I bought that when I was probably about six or seven, something like that. And we bought it at a Black & Decker outlet store. That was cool. It was Black & Decker outlet, yeah. I have all sorts of fun with that drill, and then I outgrew that and got into many other drills because I was all power tools up until about 4 years ago now. Actually a little over 3 years ago, something like that. The first hand tool, at least in the current collection of tools, was a plane. And if you go back and watch my earliest videos, my very first video was, look, I just bought a plane today, and that is my first plane. And so I've documented everything in my hand tool journey, literally from day one where I bought a plane until now. So if you want to see that progression, go and watch, 600 some videos now.
Quality's only improved a little bit.
Yeah. Be warned. The first couple years of videos are bad. What else?
The real James. All right. Brian Ross asked, what is your favorite tool to use?
Whichever one's in my hand. This is the Stanley number 48 tongue and groove plane. This is currently my favorite tool because I was playing with it just before the show began. This is a tongue and groove, and this way it will cut the tongue. This is the way it cut the groove. I swing the fence around, and this will then cut the tongue. And so one plane will create both sides of the joinery. A lot of fun. Usually it's whatever tool's in my hand. If I had to push for any particular tool, it would be this 1/2-inch chisel. It's probably the tool that I use more than any other tool. This gets pulled off on just about every single project I ever do. And if you really wanted to, you could make anything you wanted with just this, though it would take a lot more time. What else we got?
All right. Napkin asks, how does missing teeth change the quality of a saw?
Surprisingly
my smile's
not
as pretty.
Surprisingly not that much. If you're missing, 2-3 teeth, then oh well. As long as they're not in a row, it generally doesn't cause that much problem. If all the teeth you're missing are all on the same side of set, you may end up veering more one way or the other. But as long as you're only missing 1, 2, maybe 3 teeth, it's not going to be that much of an issue. If you start missing more than that, then you're probably going to want to refile it down. But most of the time, I have a couple of my regular users that are missing a tooth or two. And after I sharpen them 4 or 5 times, I'll be right back to where I was and have a tooth back in use. So don't worry about it too much. Yeah, I get picky when I'm picking up saws because there's just so many of them out there that if I see it missing a couple teeth, I'm probably going to pass it up. But in all honesty, for function, it's not that big a deal. So don't worry about it too much. What else we got? My wife has mad typing skills.
Oh, Ian was saying he was sorry for misspelling. He was using Google Voice, and I said, oh, no worries. You haven't seen a text from James. My favorite was when you guys were at the park and you were yelling at JJ.
Yes.
Anyway, sorry. Let's see. Josh K said, what would your preferred method of adjustable bookshelf mounting be?
I don't know. Probably just standard pins. I like having even pins that you could move down 1 inch at a time. I like that design. It's functional. It was worthwhile, and yeah, I'd probably go with that. So, especially if you make a template that has an even amount of holes, so you can quickly bore all the holes at the same distance on each one, that goes really easily. And if you don't have a template, it's really easy to make it. When you drill your first set of holes, you just drill through the template, and you just keep repeating that template all the way up the bookshelf. What else we got?
All right. OneBlueLagoon asked, are you doing an actual AMA on Reddit as well?
No, I thought about doing that, but I haven't. So, sorry. Oh, I forgot to plug this in.
The first time he told me we were doing an AMA, I was like, what?
Yeah, apparently
in the medical
AMA means
field,
something
it means
different.
living against medical advice, and I was very confused for a second.
Oh,
All right.
there you go.
Let's see what we got.
Oh.
And lots of hellos. Let's see.
Making a mess on the floor, sorry.
Senekis? I don't know if I'm saying that right. Have you ever considered some musical instrument project? The whistle video made me think of it.
Yes, I want to make, probably the first thing I'm going to make is a guitar. It is on my list. I have no idea when I'll get to it. It's a long ways down the list. I would like to make a good flute sometime, like a Civil War era flute. I think that would be kind of fun. And then someday I really want to make a decent violin. I think that would be a lot of fun, and doing a long series on that. Yeah, long ways down the road, but someday.
All right, I'm just getting caught up to see if there's any new.
Maybe a big bass. That would be fun. She rolls her eyes at me. Can you believe it?
I do. I'm very adept. Alan Smith asked, the stack of planes on the top shelf, what are they all for? Are you going to show how to use them all?
They are molding planes, and they get pulled out from different times. I actually have a video coming out here soon where I'm making some picture molding. And in the use of this, I'm going to be using 5 different planes, and 2 of them are molding planes. So basically, each one of these has a different profile. I'm going to pull down a couple for you. And these are basically what you would use before before routers came around. And here. Whoa, let me tip that back in focus. Sorry about that. There we go. That's better. So each one of them has a different profile. This is a round, and this is a hollow, but this also has a step here, so that you can do OGs. And so they would all have a different profile that you could then run along the board and make that design. Hollows and rounds are very common. You would have matching hollow to a round so that they would work with each other. And with just a bunch of hollows and rounds, you can do a lot of different things. So I'm going to be showing some of these. And I do use them from time to time. I don't use them that much because most of the time I'm actually going to be grabbing my Stanley 45 or 55. If I can unlock them. There we go. And these were designed so that you could have a whole bunch of different irons in there. The Stanley 55 particularly, they listed it as having 55 different planes in one. So you could actually put different molding irons in there. And this plane could do all of those moldings up there. So sometimes this is a lot more fun, though it takes a little bit more time to set up and fiddle with. Whereas these are really nice because they're set up to do that one shape, so I can run down the board and do it. But yes, molding planes, they are all over the place. And I went antique shopping today and probably saw 700-800 of them around, usually somewhere from 10 to 15 bucks. Some of the really nice ones might be 25 bucks. I don't use them that much because I have Stanley 45 and 55, but every now and then it's nice to have some of these. So I do have a collection of them up here. Of these, probably only about 5 or 6 are used regularly, and a few of them are used, well, more than half of them I've never actually used, just because they're a specific use that I just haven't done that specific use yet.
And James just doesn't ever like to just collect things.
I don't. No, I don't collect things. I've turned down more molding planes than a lot of people. Yeah, that, and I have got another 60 or so over there that I need to restore, and I want to do several videos on restoring them and sharpening them, but I just haven't had the chance to get around to it, so maybe someday.
Alrighty. Now to find where we are in the questions. La, la, la. Nightcactus asks, recently you've made a lot of great wood gifts. What is your favorite item that you have made as a gift for someone?
My wife's diamond ring.
Yes, do you guys know that?
When we were dating, I looked at diamond rings and I thought, wow, I can do that. So I taught myself goldsmithing, and I carved a wax form, shaped it, and then had a local gem shop cast it and cast the gold for me, refined the gold. And then I got the setting for it, bought the diamond. I didn't set the diamond myself because I didn't trust myself. I paid someone to do that, but actually made her ring. So that was a fun experience because I had to go through all these skills to learn in order to make it. And then in the end, I just made the one. But it made it a little bit more special, I guess.
Well, I would say it's one of a kind, except you sold the...
Yeah, my brother... I made 2 of them. Well, I made a series, several, getting closer to the shape I wanted, and the one right before I made my wife's, because hers was an investment, a wax investment. So once the wax was gone, it was gone. I sold the form, and he decided to make multiples of those, and then mass produced the form. It ended up being that my brother, when he bought his ring for his wife, bought one that was made off of the form that I sold. So it was kind of like, woohoo.
So we have matching rings, but different shaped diamonds.
Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't know that James could also do metalworking. Because it's kind of disgusting what the man can't do. But anyways, let's see. Bryan Ramsey asked, just getting into hand tools, what plane and brand would you recommend?
Don't look at the brand when looking at a plane. It's very easy to get into, Stanley's great. Well, older Stanleys, yes. Newer Stanleys, no. You think of Craftsman as a really crummy brand, but back in the day when they made planes, they actually made some really good planes. There's Trustworthy, there's Sears, there's, what are some of the other ones? Come on. There's literally hundreds of brands out there that went through an era where they were great, and then they went through an era where they weren't great. So you really have to get to know the plane and know what you're looking for. basically you're trying to find a plane that has all of the functioning and parts. And I have several videos on what are the parts of a hand plane. And so I definitely say go look at that and acquaint yourself with what all those parts are. What does a good quality piece look like? What does a cheap quality piece like? And then don't be afraid to buy a junker because there's a lot out there you can buy for $5-10, and if they turn out to be a bad plane, you'll find out pretty quickly. And it's a good way to learn. And I've purchased probably 2 or 3 dozen planes that were crummy when I first got started, just experimenting. And it's just a good way for me to learn. I like to learn by actually touching it. I don't know if a plane is bad until I've had a chance to play with it. Now that I've been working with them for a while, I can look at a plane and say, ooh, stay away from that one. Oh, this is a good one. But you really can't know that until you dive into it. I tried to make a few videos that show off the parts of a plane. What do you look for? What don't you look for? Yeah, it's mostly one of those things you don't know until you actually experiment it. So go check out those videos, and hopefully that helps you. And otherwise, I mean, if you really get into a pickle and you want to know is this a good plane or not, feel free to send me a picture and I'll give you my thoughts on it. But yeah, there's a lot of them out there. We probably, antiquing today, I probably saw somewhere around 100 different planes out there, and about 25% of them I wouldn't buy. Another 25% probably could be turned into something good. And about 50% of them out there were good user planes that I would use personally. What else we got?
Okay, hang on. They are like
questions
really
coming out the wazoo.
piling on the questions. So I'm trying to copy and paste ahead of time so we don't lose them. So let's see. Thailand doesn't know. He's from Singapore. Not necessarily a question, but has a request for showing how to do a recess for a seat.
Oh, like carving out a seat. I want to do that. I have carved a seat once, but that was a while ago, and it was more or less an experiment, and it wasn't actually turned into a seat. It was just playing with a piece of wood to try and carve it. I don't have a travisher. A travisher is a spoke shave with a curved bottom that kind of gets down into it. A fun thing to use. I'm also wanting to get a bowl adze, which makes it a lot easier. And yes, I do want to do that. One of the things I'd like to do is do a swing out seat that sits underneath the bench with a carved seat. I haven't done it yet, but it's on the list to do. So keep your eyes peeled, maybe soon. What else we got?
Okay, hang on 1 second.
I'm hanging.
Yeah. Shouldn't hang her right though, but anyways. Alan Smith asks, what is Sarah's favorite tool other than a workbench that is at the correct height? My favorite tool. Probably a kitchen tool, not necessarily a woodworking.
Is it the tool that makes you something?
Tool in the shop. What would be my favorite? Probably a chisel or something that I can use rather easily. I have to think about that. My computer. Playing with my computer. Yeah, I guess I'd have to go with a chisel.
It is amazing what you can do with a chisel. There's a lot of
I haven't practiced very much with the planes, to be honest. I should, but I don't have my workbench, so, I'll just say that's the reason why. But anyways, okay. Let's the next question. Dylan Woodworks asked, are we doing another tool build-off this year?
I don't know. Maybe. I haven't decided. Every year I say, oh, this will be the last one, and then I come around and like, oh, I'll do one more. So we'll see. If so, it was June and July, I think, is when I normally do it. So, yeah, we'll see.
All right, let's see. Brian Ross asked, what was your most difficult project you've taken on?
Marrying my wife.
I knew that was going to be your answer. I knew that was going to be your answer.
Man, what would be the most difficult project? I kind of have a hard time answering that because I don't see projects as difficult. Because the most complicated things I build, like the 10-drawer dresser, it's really just a series of simple steps, and each one of them you compartmentalize it and take it down. I think of all the projects that I built with hand tools, the dresser is the most complex in that it had the most steps to be broken down, the most pieces, but difficult, not that much. Yeah, I don't know if there's really a project that I would say this is a really difficult project, because everything is just a series of steps. Even things like hand carving, once you break it down into knowing how the wood grain works and how do you carve around things, it's not that difficult. It's just the individual steps. So I think I would have a really hard time answering that one. Sorry. Probably the dresser if you have to push my feet to it.
All right, hang on.
Although it took more than a year to make that one. So
Yes, it did.
probably the longest project I've ever had. What's that? Oh,
sorry.
she's adding more. I'm asking her to do a lot with these questions because she has to put all the questions over so that we can put them down in the description, and so that way everyone has a timestamp beside it. So she has to have the description and the timestamp
And
for
they
it.
just
What's that?
keep asking, so I'm trying to stand off of it. All right, let's see. Kishore Krishnan. Quick question. What blade do you use on your bow saw, and where can I source it?
Depends on which saw you're going to call a bow saw, because there's a lot that goes back and forth on it. Like this, technically, this is not a bow saw. This is a frame saw, because it has a frame that goes around the saw. Whereas this, let me pull these out. These are both bow saws, because they have this string on the back. So the frame is actually in compression. The frame is in between the saw and the string. So these are both bow saws. But this is a turning saw, and this is a joinery saw. So they have slightly different uses. This is a, what is the name? It's a German name. I'm not going to try pronouncing it. So this is one I want to do a couple of videos on, because when England and America went to using more back saws, the continental Europe had frame saws, and so they used these to do a lot of the joinery. This was your tenon saw. This could do all of your simple joinery work at the bench. Whereas the turning saw, this is a kit from Tools for Working Wood. Gramercy, there's the word I'm looking for. So it actually comes with the hardware and the saw blades. The frame saw, this kit is actually from Blackburn Tools, and I really like this one. It's a 32-inch blade, 2-inch wide, and I love my frame saw. This is probably my favorite saw. Well, I don't know. It's my favorite saw. I can't pick my favorites. What's next?
Hang on. You always ask me mid-highlight.
I'm good at that. I'm sorry.
No, you're not. All right. Let's see. Alan Smith asked, does James have a video on using the various features of the Stanley 45?
Yes, I have a video on the 45. I have a video on the 55. I have a video comparing the 45 and 55. I have a video on sharpening the irons. And I have to say, I'm sorry, because no matter how much I show the 45 and 55, I always get someone who's saying, well, can you show me how I do this particular cut? Or how do I do this particular blade? Well, there's a lot of different cutters you can put in there, and I can't show them all. Otherwise, I'd have 100 or so videos showing how to set them up. But you have to understand that the skates have to be sitting on the wood, and those you position them as to where they fit into that, and then you position your fence as to where it fits onto that, and you go to town. So once you understand the basics, you can use them pretty quickly. But you kind of have to have your own imagination, because I'm not going to do a video showing how to set up every individual one. So I do have the videos talking through them and showing them off. They are a little bit old, so I might do them in the future again, but we'll see. So yeah, go look those up. And if you ever want to see if I did a video If you go to my channel, you can actually search the channel for a particular term. Or if you're in just general Google or in general YouTube, you can always search wood by Wright, whatever you want. So if you search wood by Wright Stanley 45, you'll come up with the videos where I talk about the Stanley 45. So hope that helps. Did I get you in the middle of again?
1 second.
Need to have a better place to hang these up.
I'm not telling you. All right, let's see. Harrison Zucker asked, apologies if this is a novice question, but it is about hand planes. How far does the blade need to protrude? I feel like my plane always catches and doesn't cut.
The best answer for that is it should only protrude as much as is needed. The less it sticks out, the better. The finer the shaving, the better your woodworking is going to be. But the finer the shaving, the slower it goes. So every plane is going to be a little bit different. My scrub plane is sticking out almost an 1/8 inch. It is a very heavy, quick cut. But it's a scrub plane. That's what it's designed to do. Then generally my number 5 is set up with a fairly heavy cut for a blade. So it's cutting like, it's sticking out probably 1/100th of an inch or so. And then my smoothing plane, it's sticking out 1/1000th of an inch. So just taking the fine, wispy shavings off. And so every plane is going to have a different amount by how much you need to cut off. So yeah, the best answer is have it as thin as possible. If you're having problems with it not biting and catching in, that's usually a problem with it not being sharp enough. So yeah, most of the time, any problems with the plane come down to it's not sharp enough. So yeah, and every time you think, ooh, this is what sharp feels like, until you actually go back and try it again, and then you find out, oh no, this is what sharp feels like, and then you go back and try it again, it's like, oh no, this is what sharp feels like. So it's one of those experience things you have to learn. What's next?
Oh, I think I'm kind of caught up, but we still have lots of questions to go through. So,
cool.
Bait
Well, then let's hold off on new questions for a little while until we cut through these.
Yeah, because we've probably got a good 10, 12 questions to get through.
Sweet.
Bait Ammo, so just tune in. What size of plane do you recommend for a first plane?
Either a number 4 or a number 5. You're going to have different people who tell you different things. Paul Sellers particularly says a number 4. And basically, you can do anything with a number 4. It can be your smoother, it can be your joiner, and it can do all of that. Traditionally, the number 5 is called the jack plane because it's the jack of all planes. And I think the number 4 is actually a little better suited to being called the jack plane, though the number 5 is what's called the jack plane. Basically because the number 5 is a little too long to do standard smoothing, but it is better at jointing than the number 4. So either one. Whichever one you can get your hand on. Most of the time you're going to find number 5s far more often than any other thing. So these are going to be a little cheaper and easier to get to. But you'll see number 4s quite a bit. So eventually you need them all. Of course you need them all. But if you have to pick one or the other, I'd probably pick the number 4. It's a little bit more generally useful, but you'll have just as many people arguing, oh no, the number 5. So yeah, one of those two.
All right, let's see. Robert Thoelen. I've been thinking of getting a plow plane. Should I get a metal or a wooden one?
Whatever you want. I like the Stanley 45 or 55. Number 1, they work as a plow plane, but number 2, they can do all the other things. So I just like them that way. But there's something to be said for a wooden plow plane. They are so much fun to use. There's just something that feels like you're working the wood yourself because it's a wooden plane. But I mean, they do the exact same thing. So whichever you prefer. If you like the idea of traditional woodworking and feeling and becoming one with the wood, then a wooden plow plane. If you want the function and the most usable aspects of it, then get a Stanley 45 or 55. But there really isn't a difference one way or the other. Uh-oh, she's worried about something.
No, they're just a couple of comments.
Oy,
okay. I got something over there for a second. Kevin O'Connor asked, you're going to the UK in May for Maker Central. Have you ever been to the UK before? No! go.
Nope.
Oh, we're excited.
Looking forward to it. Been to China, never been to Europe or UK. So
Been to South Africa. I'm so excited for London.
it'll be 10 days without the kids. We're looking forward to it.
The reason we're more excited now. Is on the bucket list.
Yeah.
Going to London before I go to Hawaii. Explain that one, but excited. All right. Let's see. Tommy Lee asked for a molding plane. Where can I buy the blades for the wooden ones?
Most of the time, if you're getting a molding plane, it comes with the iron. If you have a molding plane body and you don't have the iron, then most of the time I would say go get the one with the iron and throw out the one without the iron, or use it for something else. The iron is the plane, and the body is just shmoo in general focus, because the iron is worth more than the body. You can get just a blank iron that you can then shape to match the body, but that is a ton of work. Says the hand tool guy who does a ton of work on everything. I believe Tools for Working Wood sells them. You can get them on Veritas's site. There's a couple places around where you can buy blank molding plane irons. And you have to know the size of the tang, the size of the head. The tang, is the tang centered? Is the tang off to one side or the other? And so you have to go and get all those things set up before you can buy the blank. And then you have to set it in and scribe the blank to the shape, and then you have to grind it to that, and then you have to grind the bevel in it, and you have to put it back in and refit it, check it out, go back and forth until the bevel then matches the plane body. Or you could just go buy a molding plane with the iron already in it. So I usually do the latter. But yeah, I believe Tools for Working Wood has them. I think. But I'm pretty sure Veritas has them on their website. Veritas doesn't make them, but they list them there on Lee Valley. So that'd be the first place I'd probably look. I think Hawk even has them now. But I could be wrong. Probably am. What's next?
I think I'll keep my comment to myself. Henry Reesor asks, I'm making a toolbox for hand tools. What wood would you recommend to make it out of?
Whatever wood you have on hand. Whenever I get the what wood should I make this out of, there are way too many other questions that come into it. If you're looking for ease of work, walnut and cherry, they look great. They have a fantastic feel. They work really well with hand tools. Are they the best tool for a cabinet? There really isn't a best wood for it. So I mean, there are great tool cabinets that were made out of pine. There are great tool cabinets that were made out of exotic babinga and purple heart and other things, and there were great tool cabinets made out of cherry oak and walnut. So whatever you've got, there isn't a perfect wood for it. Sorry, but that's the world we live in. So anytime anyone wants to ask me, what wood should I make it out of, then go to your stock, your supplier, wherever you buy wood, and find the wood you like. And that's the best wood to make.
All right. Thariq Jacoby, can you make carvings such as the wooden box you made with only chisels with any wood? Or are there better kinds of wood one should use when trying this?
Yes, there are woods that are easier to work with a chisel, such as walnut is a fairly easy one. Cherry is a fairly easy one. White oak, what I used, is actually a really hard wood to do it with. But, I mean, you can use anything. I wouldn't do it out of something like palm. That is just way too splintery. But if you want the easiest wood to do it out of, it would be, oh, come on, what's the name of it? I have a block of it sitting over there, and I can't remember the name of it. Carving wood. I can't remember. I want to say beech. It starts with a B. Not balsa, not beech. Don't do it out of beech. Not birch. Birch would be good, but it's not the word what I'm thinking about. I'll remember it later, and I'll blurt it out.
It'll probably be something that's not even starting with a B, because S equals hammer.
Yeah, let me see if it's actually written on that block over there. Yeah, well, it's generally considered the easiest wood to carve, and no, it's just marked with $2. Beech. No, I said.
You just said it wasn't.
No, it's not beech. It's. I can't remember it. I'll remember it later. But yeah, this is the easiest stuff in the world to carve.
Basswood.
Basswood. Ooh, I love my
Thank you,
wife.
Bill.
Basswood.
They all know what you're talking about.
Yeah, basswood is incredibly easy. It's smooth to carve. If you can't do it out of basswood, you can't do it. So that's the easy one. Probably the next one for me would be walnut. I really like how walnut works. It's a really nice wood to work with. But yeah, basswood is generally considered the beginner's wood for woodworking, for carving. So I've got this block. If any of you have any idea what I should carve, I don't know. I want to have some fun with it. We'll see. What's next?
Oh, let's see. Sawyer Squad. Say that 10 times fast. What is an estimate of the tools you have?
An estimate? As in how much they cost?
I'm assuming.
Up until recently, let's say it was just over a year ago, I broke $1,000 on my total expense of tools. I think in the last year or so, I've been putting more into it and getting some more specific tools. So I think I'm somewhere around $2,000 or so that I've spent on all of my tools. And what you see back here is probably only about a third of what all I have in the shop. And I'm pretty frugal. I don't buy things unless they're really dirt cheap, or I just have to have that particular piece and I just can't find it anywhere. Like the Stanley 48 swing arm. I've been trying to get one of these for a while and I just haven't found one in my price range. I got this one for $20 and I was overly excited that I was able to get it that cheap. But most of the time they're like $50, $60. So yeah, but if I were to go and sell everything at a decent price, I probably have somewhere in the range of $10,000 to $15,000 worth of tools. But it would take a while to actually sell them at that price.
That's what you put in the insurance estimate.
Yes.
All right, let's see. Lucas Murphy. If I want to make a wooden plane, what should I look for in a blade? I think we kind of talked about that.
Yeah, you're going to get people to look for in the actual plane. I'd probably go and buy a hawk iron. They're really, really good. They're simple. I like his chip breakers. Although DFM, the same company that makes he makes my card scrapers that I sell, he is soon going to be selling irons. So I'm really looking forward to him doing that. He actually gave me one to test out that I keep in my number 5 here, and I have been really happy with it so far. A lot of people are going to be very picky about the steel type, whether it be A2 or O1 or PMV11 or whatever the steel type you want. Everyone out there is going to have their own idea. I'd actually like to try and get one out of carbide. A while ago, Veritas made them with carbide, but you need diamonds to sharpen them. I think that would be kind of fun to play with. But if it's your first one, the difference between steels is really something that you're not going to notice until you've been playing with them for a long time. So don't worry about it too much. That's my best advice. But if you really want something you can trust, go get a hawk iron, go get a Veritas iron, or DFM when he gets his up. So, yeah.
Okay. So you have a doppelganger out there because GingerBeardMan. I like that. Do you put a micro bevel on your plain blades? I've seen
Nope.
so many different techniques and it just seems like extra work.
Yep, that's the way I feel. The nice thing about it is that you're always getting a perfect bevel cut no matter what you do. So especially if you're hand filing and you slip around a little bit, doing that secondary bevel just gives you that nice crisp edge. But once you've gotten decent with sharpening, it's just an extra step, and I really don't use it. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who swear by it and they absolutely love it. And some really well-known woodworkers who do it every time. And so there really isn't, it's not a bad thing. It's just, I feel it's an extra step and not really necessary. So, if you try it and you like it, then great. There's nothing wrong with it. Just, if you don't need it, why do it? So that's my thought. That's really a lot of my I try and do things as simple as possible with as few steps as possible. Unless I find those extra steps to be something that are enjoyable or something that adds a fun step to something, then I might throw them in there, but most of the time I just like to do it in the most concise manner with as few jigs as possible. I'm not a huge fan of using extra jigs. My personal preference. What else we got?
Hang on, I gotta look at the correct thing. Greg Moore asks, are there good retail sources for hand planes today in the land of big box stores packed with power tools and screwdriver kits?
No. If you buy a hand plane in a big box store, it's trash. Now, I have to say, there are some people who swear by the Cobalt planes, but of the several that I have tried, I have not found one that I would enjoy or endorse. The cheapest thing out there that I would endorse would be Wood River. They're a Japanese plane, a Chinese plane, and they do a really good job. They're actually, for the money, they are phenomenal. They're really good. I do also like the new Stanley Sweetheart. They have a few cheap things about them, but my low angle jack is actually one of those. Like the lever cap is made of aluminum. It really doesn't hurt the function of it, though they feel a little bit odd. I would like to redo the handle. I find the handle a little bit clumsy, but it's a decent plane. It works really well. So, yeah. But in a big box store, no. I mean, occasionally some of the block planes are okay. You have to do some tweaking to get them up and going, but yeah, for the most part, if it's a regular bench plane, no, don't get it there. You only end in tears. What's next?
Hang on 1 second. Sorry. Let's see. Kishore Krishnan. Mr. Cosman recommends a rabbet on the back of a dovetail. Do you also recommend this, or are you pure Paul Sellers school? Rabbet on the back of the dovetail is an old technique. It makes it really easy for aligning things, and some people really like it. I'm not a huge fan of it. If you go back and look at most old dovetails, they're pretty straightforward, and they don't do the rabbet method, though a lot of people like that. So, six of one, half dozen other. I don't like it. I find it to just be another step. And if you know anything about me, I don't like extra steps. So, yeah, I don't put a rabbet on it. If you like it, then you should have put a rabbet on it. Yes, I did. Yeah, I saw one of the comments, Wood River is not cheap. Well, no, that's the problem is hand planes that are decent are not cheap. Now, I have to say, I have heard good things about the Grizzly planes, and those are cheap. Those are like $35, $40, which is dirt cheap for hand planes. I've heard several people say they're really good. I haven't had the chance to play with it, and I haven't heard from anyone who I particularly trust if they're good or not. But one of these days I do want to get my hands on them and see what they're like. So if you want to experiment, the Grizzly planes are really cheap. But in the world of hand planes, Wood River is about as cheap as they get. Unless you're going to go antique, which is usually the route I go. What's next? She's counting. So we got about 15 minutes left. Sorry, I shouldn't have thrown numbers out. Yeah, we've got 15 questions. I think
we have more than enough questions.
Yeah,
so
if
we're not going to get to them if you have any more in there. Sorry.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to keep it within an hour. Let's see. Tyler Kimble asks, can you discuss your Maker's Mark branding iron and how to go about getting one made?
Yes. Here it is. I have this that I made a while ago. Let me show you a closer up view of it. And this is my little branding iron. And I actually had it 3D printed out of stainless steel with a 1/4-inch nub on the back that I then put onto this 1/4-inch thread connector, thread rod into a bolt.
It looks
What's that?
A little fuzzy.
Anyway, let me see if I can. I do want to do a newer one sometime with a larger head, something like that. So I'm probably going to be doing a video showing how I make it. But this was like, I think it was like $20 to get this printed, and then a couple pieces on here and I use it quite a bit. But I do want to make a bigger one here, so I'm hoping to have a video out on that in the not too distant future. But yeah, I just heat this up with a propane torch and use it. So, fun little tool. What's next?
All right. Ed Ratcliffe asked, have you ever thought of trying the maloof joint?
Yes. The problem with the maloof joint is it is a tool designed for power tools. It is not designed for hand tools. So it's designed to be put together with power tools. Actually, Shannon Rogers has a good video on doing it with hand tools. It is incredibly convoluted and complex to do with hand tools, and there are easier ways to do similar joints that work just as well with hand tools. But yeah, I guess if I were to do a maloof chair, I would do one with that joint, and I would spend the time to make it happen. But yeah, I don't have any intention to do that. Not a huge fan of the style, but I know I'm going to get burnt for saying that, but I'm sorry. What else?
Shawn K asked, do you plan on moving into CNC or 3D printing?
I actually used to do 3D printing. Let's see, it was probably about 8 years ago. No, it was about 7 years ago. It was just after Melody was born.
Yeah.
I made 2 3D printers, rip wraps, and those were a lot of fun. And then I sold them as my hobbies changed. I have thought about getting another one here soon, but I don't know. I thought about doing like plastic inlays. That might be kind of fun. CNCs, I've done a few in the past, but I haven't. I don't have any. I do someday want to make a foot-powered CNC. I think that would be a lot of fun, but that might be down the road a little ways once I built a few other things. It would be kind of like a worthless tool that would take a lot of time to build. So, yeah, I'd have to really devote some time to that. What's next?
All right. Nathan Fine says, did you take woodworking classes or just teach yourself?
My father taught me most of what I know about power tools. Growing up, I was in his wood shop and built things with his tools. And my father was a power tools only kind of guy. So I learned on what he was doing. Hand tools, I mostly taught myself, other than when I mean taught myself, it's like learning from other people, and many who are now friends in the field, whether it be Paul Sellers, Shannon Rogers, and so on, and just watching as much as I can and digesting from as many sources as possible. But a lot of it is very similar to power tools. It's just another way of thinking about it because you have to think about the way the wood grain works. And so rather than doing it with a saw blade, a circular saw, then you're doing it with a hand saw. And it's the same steps. It's just using a different tool to accomplish the movement. And particularly the big difference between power tools and hand tools is with power tools, the skill is in setting up the jig and setting up the tool. Whereas with hand tools, the skill is using the hand tool. And so it's less about setting up the jig and setting up the method to then run it through. It's more about how do you control the tool, how do you run it with your hand. So that's what makes it fun. What's next?
Let's see. Michael Heemstra asked, I am just starting out in woodworking. How do you recommend learning sawing, chiseling, and planing techniques? Just jump into projects, or are there any drills?
Just jump into it. A lot of people out there will give you all these practice things that you can do. In all honesty, if you wanted the first project you ever build to be a Elizabethan highboy, go for it. Just break it down into each individual step and experiment along the way.
Do you not have your things plugged in?
Do I not have my things plugged in?
Justin just gave a super chat.
Oh, I don't have my things plugged in, and they're down here on the floor.
That means you get a dance and clogs.
Oh, stink. I got to do a clog dance.
That's not a dance.
Is that better?
No. No.
Thank you, Justin. Justin Ford. Woohoo. You're awesome, man. My new favorite person. What's next?
Oh, dear Lord.
You married me. These other people volunteered to join.
That was before I knew the truth. Exodus asked, have you ever thought of carving a gun stock? Sort of falls into gunsmithing, but always wanted to get into checkering myself.
Yeah, I almost bought a set of checkering tools the other day, or well, not the other day, it was a couple months ago. I thought that would be a lot of fun to play with. Yes, I would like to do that someday. I just haven't had the chance. So it's on the list, but we'll see. Maybe I can meet up with some other gunsmithing YouTube channel and do a collab. That'd be kind of interesting.
All right. Rocky Smith asks, James, what would be a good draw knife?
A draw knife would be a good draw knife. Well, when you get into antique draw knives, there really isn't a good, better, best draw knife, and there are so many makers of them out there that you can't say this maker or that maker. And every one of them is a little different, and before you know it, you're going to have 10 draw knives, and each one of them has a slightly different bevel angle or a handle angle or bevel up or bevel down, or there's just so many different things that you will use them for that you've got to collect them all. And I have 2 of them hanging up here. These are the 2 that I use the most commonly. I like this one just being a little shorter. It's easier for working at the bench, whereas this one's easier to skew and then run across things. So these are the 2 I use the most, but I probably have another 10 or 15 down there. Once I get my shave horse, you'll be seeing these and use a lot more though. So yeah. What's next?
All right. Walter Morgan asks, what is your present and next project?
Right now I'm just doing a bunch of little things. Every time I finish a big project, I do a bunch of little projects along the way. I have a few other things, like this week I'm shooting a video on how to make your own buffing compound. So I'm actually playing with Han Solo and carbonite, as well as I'm making my own mold to then make my own logos. So we're playing with those. And I've got a few other little things that I'm going to be messing with. I have a picture frame. I'm actually trying to carve a stool, an entire stool, using only a chisel. Literally chopping the tree down with a chisel, shaping the lumber with a chisel, and carving and doing all the joinery with just one single chisel, one little 1/2-inch chisel. That's quite the project. But the next big project will probably be our bed. I want to do a mission-style bed and pull out drawers underneath and the whole 9 yards. So that will be coming up soon. Maybe. We'll see. What's next?
Take as long as the dresser?
Yeah, we'll see.
Coming in 2020. Let's see. As for GS. Okay, so he's got like 2 questions and one-ish. At what point would you say Stanley planes start to lose their quality?
That's really kind of a loaded question because everyone's going to put it at a different point. Most people say post-war they start to go downhill. And in collectability and functionality, and collectability and the way they look, yes, after post-war they get simpler and simpler. But most of the cases, I would say until the late 50s, early 60s, they held their quality, though they were made out of simpler projects. Rather than having brass knobs, they're steel knobs. Is the functionality different? No, the steel's actually a little better because it will withstand more. And they have things in there that are just they're simpler. They're not as flashy, but they're still a good tool. So most people are going to put it somewhere from like the end of the 50s to post World War II, somewhere in that range. If you have anything newer than anything in the 60s and newer, yeah, stay away from it. Anything pre-war up until like 1890 is great. Any newer than that, any older than 1890, then they start to lose a lot of features that are really, really useful. The butter zone for me is like 1925, 1929. That's what I really like. You get a lot of the functionality, you get the pretty look of it. That's where I think they hit their best. Though some people like to say they hit their best at like the late 40s, because that's when they're probably the most functional tool. So everyone's going to put it in a little different spot.
All right, and then the second half, what would be a better purchase, a standard metal plane or an old Stanley transitional plane with a wood bottom? Generally, I'm going to say right off the bat, metal is going to be a little bit better because there are more of them out there. It's easier to find parts. They don't wear out as quickly. They're generally more functional.
But a transitional plane is a really nice plane to use. And for those of you who don't know, my transitional's not right here. Oh, okay, well, I'll grab this one. This is my transitional smoother, and it has a wooden body and then the metal top. And so it all functions the exact same as a standard. You have your lever, you have your depth adjustment, but it has a wooden sole. And the wooden sole feels phenomenal. It just glides across the wood. And there's something to be said for that. It feels really, really good. But in functionality, having an all metal plane is better long term. Otherwise, you're going to be wearing this out. The plane sole goes out of flat, and so you have to reflatten it. Every time you flatten it, you lose material. And so eventually the mouth gets too big. And so there's back and forth on that. Everyone's going to have a different opinion. But for me, I like this for my smoother. I don't pull it out as much as I probably should, just because I like that final feel. But for most planes, I prefer the steel. Personal preference. What else we got? We got time for a couple more?
Yeah, we have 1, 2, 3,
That fell out.
5.
Gotta put a new latch in for that one.
Let's see. DC Romo asked, this might be silly, but how do you keep your hands supple smooth with all those hand tools? Just sharpening my chisels, I think I've lost part of a fingertip.
Yeah, that happens.
They're not that supplely smooth.
No, they're extra calloused. The weightlifting also adds to that, so everything's hard and gripply.
And, although I don't think you've lost fingernails, but you.
No, I've shaved off blood. Skin and I've lost a lot of blood.
Let's see. Bernard Great House asks, picked up 2 adjustable sash planes the other day to restore and put them back into use. Never seen one before. Wonder if you have messed with any before.
Yes, I have several of them actually. By the dust on top, you can tell I haven't used this one in a while. Oh no, my irons are falling out. Yes, so if you don't know, the sash planes make the 2 sides of the window sash, and you can adjustably slide these apart. Here, let me actually loosen this up. And they are a lot of fun to work with, but you have to have a sash or want to make a sash. So you can actually, here, that's what the profile looks like. And you can actually move these apart to create larger and smaller panels. And so in this one, there's 3 pieces of boxing that come through, and the cutters each have a different profile. I've never had the opportunity to use one, and I have 2 very similar like this, and then I also have the pair for the Stanley 45 and Stanley 55, but I've never actually had the opportunity to use one, so maybe someday, but not yet. That would make a good video. Maybe I'll do that sometime. Be fun to play with.
All right, Adam Wilson asks, what are your thoughts on the Stanley 50? It seems to be a simpler version of the 55, but I'm sure there are other differences.
Yeah, the Stanley 50 is basically just a plow plane. It doesn't do all the extras. It doesn't do the frills. And so if you're looking for a simple plow plane, booyah, Stanley 50 is a great one for that. Otherwise, it's kind of it's a plow plane. It's not an overall combination plane. So yeah, I don't have a 50, and I've never actually used a 50. I've just seen them a couple times, and they weren't a very common one because they weren't that much cheaper than the Stanley 45. And so you could get a Stanley 45 to do everything the 55 would do. Everything the 50 would do, plus a lot of other things. So why save a little bit of money and not get all the other tools that the 45 would have? So the 45 was fairly common. The 50 was not very common.
All right. Brad's Workbench asks, what's your view on pallet wood? Love it or hate it?
Hate it. I can't stand the stuff. If I had a power tool shop where I could run things through a planer, run them through a table saw, and dimension things quickly, it would be very good. But there really isn't a whole lot of use for 1/2 inch thick material for the planks. and the runners on either end are so full of nails and such weird shapes that they're just not a functional piece of wood. And on top of that, I found so many other sources where I can get free or dirt cheap wood that's of far better quality than pallet wood. It's not my cup of tea. Now, there's a lot of people out there who really love it. Good friend Paul Jackman, he lives on this stuff, but it's just not my thing.
And we don't have any pallet wood things in our house.
No, I'm not a great rustic type person. How many more questions do we have? One? Okay,
and
cool.
You kind of set up Jeff Kerr's last question. Where do you get the majority of your lumber?
The majority of my lumber actually comes from local sawyers. I look on Craigslist, and you'll see occasionally someone will pop up and say, I have a supply of lumber I'm selling. And so I'll contact them, and a lot of times there's someone with a wood miser or an Alaskan chainsaw mill, and they've milled up a bunch of lumber that's been air drying in their backyard for a couple of years, and I'll buy it from them. That is a great source. It's local. A lot of times I can go and point to, yeah, that's the stump where this piece of furniture grew. It's kind of fun to be able to tell people, the dresser that I made came from several trees on a farm just south of Madison, Wisconsin. And being able to point that out. The base on my table came from a tree about 10 miles away from here that I helped cut down. And so I love getting lumber that way. I have gotten, I'd probably say 80% of my lumber comes from Craigslist sales, where someone's put it up, and I only buy lumber like once or twice a year, and I'll buy it in large lots and fill my basement with it. But becoming good friends with someone who has a sawmill or where I get most of my lumber from. I've actually never purchased lumber from a lumber yard, other than every now and then I'll need quick sticks of lumber for a project. I'll run to Menards, the big box store, and pick up something that I just have to have for that particular piece. I don't have something on hand, or I need a straight grain piece of wood that doesn't quite fit. I'll run there and pick it up and pay through the nose for it. But most of my lumber comes from Craigslist. Trying to think of what else. Or Matt Cremona. I've been up to his place quite a bit.
Or your backyard.
Yeah, in my backyard. I've pulled quite a few things out of the trees in my backyard.
All right, so we have two more quick ones, because one, we can't not ask Justin's after the super chat. And he is any good suggestions on inexpensive rasps?
All of my rasps and files, with a couple exceptions, I've bought at antique stores and estate sales, and there'll be like a box of files and rasps, and I'll dig through that and I'll buy the box for $5, and I'll keep 2 or 3 out of there, and the rest of them are just scrap. And that's where almost all of my files and rasps come from. They're not the best quality in the world, but they cut, and they cut fine. Will they last as long as a really high quality brand new one? No. But I can go to another antique sale or estate sale and buy a whole nother bucket of them and have far more than I'll ever use. So that's usually where I get most of mine. With the exception now of my saw sharpening files, I buy the ones from Veritas. I believe they're Banco. I like those. Up until recently, I bought the big box store triangular files. Those work well. They just wear out a little bit faster. But I spend the money now and buy the really nice ones for my saw sharpening. So that's where I get most of mine.
Okay. Last quick one. And if you guys just put up recent ones, James can answer them in the chat. But Jeremy Moskaluk, I know you made your dining room table base out of elm. Do you have any tips on hand planing elm? I'm having a hard time with all the interlocking and reversing grain.
Yes, it can be a very tricky one. You've got to have the mouth really close. You make the mouth opening needs to be the same thickness as your shaving. Basically, the smaller your mouth is, the less tear out you're going to have. Number 2, the chip breaker needs to be really close to the tip of the iron. And when I'm doing fine smoothing, the chip breaker is back like a 64th of an inch or even less than that. It's right up next to the tip of the iron. And number 3, the iron has got to be deadly sharp. And I sharpen it far more often when I'm working with elm or something like that, where it's interlocking, twisting grain. Once you have those 3 things, it will work really well. But even then, after all that's been said and done, you'll still get a little bit of tear out here and there, and that's where you pick up a card scraper and you clean out that tear out spot. And so yes, technically you're having like an undulating surface as you hit some areas where the tear out is, and that really fries the brain of most power tool people. But in functionality, it's not something you can see or feel or notice. And so that's one of the things where card scrapers really come into their own, is you can get into those spots and clean out just those problem areas and get a nice smooth surface. So that's usually what I do. But yeah, elm's fun. It's actually an easy wood to cut in that it doesn't have a lot of resistance, but it's twisted and evil. Cool. Is that it?
We're going to call it.
Cool.
We could be here
If I don't get to your
minutes.
question, go ahead and send me an email or a message, and I'll try and respond to those on there. If you do have some quick question, feel free to message me. I love answering those. And we'll probably do another live in another month or two. We'll do another Q&A. We'll do a live every Tuesday here at 7 p.m. Central Time. So come in and join those. And for those of you who don't know the organization, every Tuesday we do a live in the evening. And then on Thursday, I usually put out a smaller video. And then on Saturday, I put out the larger build video for the week. So that's my normal progression of things. So yeah, I think that'll do it. I forget anything?
I don't think so.
Sweet. Well, then until next time, have a wonderful day.
Bye.
Now let's play the Find the Button game. I know. Here it comes. We're looking for it. I'm holding the position.